Um, so good evening, everyone, and welcome to the second webinar of the Irreplaceable Grand Canyon series. My name is Allison Gitlin, and I am the Grand Canyon Program Manager for Sierra Club's Grand Canyon or Arizona chapter. And I want to thank you for joining us for this important set of conversations. This series is a collaboration between the Grand Canyon chapter of the Sierra Club and the creator of Grand Canyon TV podcast. And we're bringing you a series of webinars and podcasts to spread awareness about threats to the Grand Canyon region, highlighting uranium mining, proposed dams and tourist developments, and an expanding ski resort on the San Francisco peaks. Tonight, we're going to focus on the Little Colorado River, and we're going to discuss its importance, its ongoing threats, and how people are working to protect it. We'll spend about an hour talking about the subject, and then we'll provide you with some ways that you can help out. After the presentation, we'll also give you plenty of time for questions, for the audience to ask questions of the speakers. Now the Zoom rules, which I'm sure you all know, but just to repeat, is that you should stay muted during the entire presentation. For the best experience, use speaker view. And you should enter your questions in the chat at the end, and someone will read as many of them as we have time for. We are recording tonight, so if you don't want to be on video, please turn off your camera. Thank you. I would like to start with an acknowledgement that although several tribal voices are represented during this series, Grand Canyon and the San Francisco Peaks is the current and ancestral homeland of many tribes, including the Havasupai, Hopi, Wallapai, Kaibab Band of Paiutes, Las Vegas Band of Paiutes, Moapa Band of Paiutes, Navajo Nation, Paiute Band of Utah, San Juan Southern Paiute Tribe, Pueblo of Zuni, Yavapai Apache Nation, Ute Mountain Ute, Acoma, San Carlos Apache, and more. I'm speaking to you from Flagstaff in the shadow of the peaks within this cultural crossroads. So now that you know where I'm coming to you from, I want to invite you all to introduce yourself and tell me in the chat where you're joining from. And I also encourage you to use the chat and talk amongst yourselves during the presentation. I think there'll be a lot of good stuff to discuss. I'm really excited about tonight's discussion because our two guests are frequent collaborators and friends, and they're both people who I consider to be essential to developing my own understanding of this and many other issues. And I think over time, we've all learned a lot together.
Yes.
Our guests tonight are Danae, our Navajo Grand Canyon Program Manager for Grand Canyon Trust, Savannah Riggs, and Tewa and Hopi artist and musician, Ed Kabodi. And as I mentioned previously, many tribes have connections to the area we're speaking about tonight. So it's going to be impossible for our guests to speak for everyone with connections to the Little Colorado River and its confluence with the Colorado River. They will represent their own unique points of view and maybe the organizations they're part of, but we make no claims to be presenting every single perspective here. Sure. So with that, I'd like to begin by inviting our speakers to introduce themselves. So let's start with you, Ed. Will you give us an introduction to who you are?
Yes. Era umbiagindi nabi kemaing adi nabi matuing kuidovi se dovi me ko oing o huaping amumu kwari ari ke atoa hap o wingi are komope o wingi o hosongi weri biagindi. My name is Ed Kabodi, and I am from the Badger clan of the Tewa people. I'm from the Tewa village of Kapo'owinge, which means the village of singing water, out in northern New Mexico, and also the village of Sumopave on Second Mesa in Hopi. My father is from there. I'm an enrolled member of the Hopi tribe, although being a matrilineal society, I consider myself a Tewa of the Badger clan. I'm an artist and a musician, and I like to combine the arts and music together to educate people about issues related to the indigenous people and lands of the Colorado Plateau. So in that sense, I consider myself to be an edutainer. That's a little word I stole from Walt Disney, but when he was introducing his True Life series, you know, way back when, he used that combination of words, edutainment, or education rather, and entertainment. You bring those two together. I think it's a very powerful medium. And I would like to say that I think over the last year, so many of us have begun to become more conscious about the concept of systemic racism, and I'm grateful to be here and grateful to be able to have that concept to articulate in a much broader way some of the things that are taking place and have been taking place for hundreds of years. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ed. And next, Serena, will you introduce yourself?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Serena Riggs here. I work at the Grand Canyon Trust as a Grand Canyon Program Manager. I'm from the Navajo Nation. My family is from Big Mountain, which is between Peabody and the Hopi Mesas. My first clan is Chichidane, which means I'm Cherokee Apache on my matrilineal side. Yeah, I'm just happy to be here and ready to talk about the issues at hand.
Great, thank you so much, Serena. So with that, I'll give you a little introduction to our issue, and then we'll pass it off to Serena to give you some more details. So the Little Colorado River has unfortunately been the target of many a bad proposal the past few years, starting around 2012 when we began to learn about a proposal for a tourist development that included a tram to the bottom of the canyon near the confluence of the Little Colorado and Colorado Rivers in Grand Canyon. The project garnered widespread outrage and worldwide attention to the isolated location. And thanks to the persistence and dedication of a number of activists, the Navajo Nation rejected the proposal in 2017. However, without increased protections, the area remains the subject of other threats. In 2019, everyone was absolutely astonished when a company called Pumped Hydro Storage proposed a series of dams along the river that would create a type of hydroelectric project. When power was needed, water would flow downhill, and when power wasn't needed, it would be pumped back upward. Then in 2020, yet another dam proposal was floated for Big Canyon, which is a tributary of the Little Colorado River. These disastrous proposals would have destroyed the river and canyons beneath the reservoirs, and they're still proposals, so they still could, and would industrialize the area with transmission lines and pumps. So Serena, will you explain some more details of these proposals? I know you have a presentation that you can show us with some images.
Yes, I do have a presentation, but it's okay. I can just go with what I have to say. Yeah, thank you for the introduction of both projects. The Escalade development was an issue situated on a Navajo reservation, and the Escalade project involved 420 acres of a resort that was to be built on the east rim of the Grand Canyon. And there was a tram that was to go down to the bottom of the canyon, which is situated at the Little Colorado River and Colorado River. So that would be the female and male river from the Dene perspective. And at the bottom of the river, there was to be a walkway and little snack bar and everything, just so that you can view that, you can view everything from the bottom of the canyon. It was projected to take about 10,000 visitors a day, and that was their main attraction as what the developers had projected. And so the families of the area, the community members of the area on either side, Botaway Gap chapter and Cameron chapter, the majority of them did not approve of the project because they saw that the developers would profit off of this development, but the money would not be going directly to the communities of the Navajo Nation. So, and then not only that, there was an issue of common shared cultural space. If you look at the Grand Canyon, you see it as being affiliated with 11 tribes of the region. And so when you look at the confluence of the Grand Canyon, In the LCR, you see that it still has that common share space of 11 affiliated tribes. There's a lot of cultural and historic facts down there. There's like sites down there. There's, the canyon and the LCR region, they have 11 different names from the 11 different tribes. There's 11 different voices, prayers, all of that that's affiliated with the area. And then not only that, aside from cultural protections, you're looking at the environmental protections, and you do have policy and legislation in place currently that protects the LCR Gorge. And it does acknowledge that there are endangered species in the area from various plants and birds that have habitats in the canyon. And of course, you have the humpback chub that lives in the warmer waters of the LCR. So when you're looking at this in a bigger perspective, whatever would happen there in the canyon would greatly impact the whole canyon, all the way down to as far as downstream as you can imagine. Everybody thinks the Grand Canyon continuously runs to Mexico, but it doesn't do that no more. There's a lot of uses of that water, and the water gets diverted to other communities. And so if you have an impact like Escalade or dams, you're going to have a significant impact downstream into many communities down there. So going from there, after Escalade was defeated, there has been plans in place on what long-term protection looks like and what can we do about it. And then, as Allison had pointed out, the dam proposal came upon us. And so how do we address this proposal, which is of course led by outside influencers? And looking at this, there's no prior consultation with tribes that are impacted to the area, including Navajo Nation. This is a proposal that's approved by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And so that oversees energy solutions for the US, whatever that could be, and whatever energy capacity that is, if that's dams, if that has to do with uranium, nuclear storage, or if that's pipelines, or just anything that you can think of that has to deal with energy. There's the situation with the FERC process is that it takes into consideration of what's best for bigger cities and not looking at the communities or states that are impacted. So we're currently addressing issues that revolve around the FERC process.
Okay, thank you, Sarana, for that. Next, I'd like to ask you both to tell us a little bit about your connection to the river and the confluence area, and tell us what's special about this place. So let's start with Ed, and if you want to tell us a little bit about your connections to this area and what you think makes it special. Ed, are you there?
Sorry, I had muted myself.
It happens.
But, yeah, it's a heavy question, and it's a difficult question to answer to a non-cultural audience. It's a difficult thing to explain. Maybe I can begin by saying that on a scale of 1 to 10 in sacred significance to the Hopi Nation, the area surrounding the confluence, I would say on that 1 to 10 scale would probably read about a 21. It is one of the most significant areas in our cosmology. Our origins as a human race in our paradigm as Hopi is that human life begins there, near the confluence of the Colorado River and the Little Colorado. what we call Sipapuni or Nangsipu in Tewa, which is really the womb. It's the womb of the earth. It's in some ways, it could also be referred to as an umbilical cord, to humanity, that still connects us to that original womb. Sipapuni, being a geographical feature that, according to scientists, has been forming, for millions and millions of years. But there in that sacred place, of glowing water, it represents the pulse to our people of the entire world. And to realize now that what has been taking place for millennia in the overflow of that mountain, that no longer takes place. So what that translates to us as is that the earth's pulse is weakening. The earth's pulse, is struggling. Mother Earth is really in a critical condition. And I think that, again, according to our paradigms of looking at the world, we would say that many of the things that are happening in today's climate, and what I mean by that is just the general atmosphere of the life that we live in, whether it's in our pursuit of technology or comforts, or whether it's dealing with worldwide pandemics or the threat of war. All of these things are evidence of the sickness of our society and the sickness of our world. Getting back to that area of the confluence, the most important deities, and I don't like that word, because to me that doesn't translate into really what we believe, but for lack of a better term, in English, I would say, some of the very most important deities of our people abide there. This is the place where we were born as a human race. This is also the place where the soul returns. Musky, the land of the dead, there near the confluence. This is the home of the caretaker of the plateau and the earth, Mesa, the first one. This is the home and residence of the Pokonhoya, the warrior twins that are referred to in many Southwest cultures. This is the home of Spider Woman. When, again, I guess just to reiterate what I said at the beginning, on a scale of 1 to 10, the area in sacred significance is a 21.
Thank you, Ed. I'm really grateful to you for sharing that with us. I realize these things aren't easy to talk about. Thank you. Sarana, will you talk to us a little bit about what this area means to you?
Yeah. Yes, growing up in the area, like Western Agency of Navajo Nation, to me, I see it on my daily drive as I go home to go see my mom into the city, and I see a different view, and I see the canyons to my left as I'm driving north to the city. And as I've worked on the Escalade project with the families of the area and working with the community members of Cameron and Bottle Gap, I've come to know the area a lot more deeper. I've had a chance to camp out on the rim on the family's homestead. I've seen, the families go out there and do their ranching out on the area, and I've explored the back roads out there, and I've had many numerous opportunities to explore all over. And then going to the salt trail, but never going down into the canyon, because I know that as I was told, you just don't go into certain spaces just to go be adventurous. You have to be mindful of the space and the space that you're going to go visit, because as Ed said, deities is a lot more than just one being or one entity there. There's life that's around you and that surrounds you as a whole. If you're stepping on the ground, there's life there. If you're breathing the air, there's life around you. And if you look above you, you see the birds flying. There's a whole realm that surrounds us that we have to be cognizant of, and we have to be aware of and be respectful of. And so when you're in the area, you're also learning not just how to be respectful of the area, but how to listen to the people who are telling you about the area, their lifelong experiences of living there, their spiritual and cultural connections to the area. And it doesn't have to be just the people that live there. It's people who have been working on the land too, people that have been trying to protect the area. It could be archaeologists, it could be somebody that's collecting studies on the water because of uranium contamination. It could be somebody talking about farming on the LCR. And then when you're talking about the LCR, you're just not thinking about, like in my perspective, I just said I look from Cameron and look west and I see the canyons, and to other people, the LCR is a bigger component, and it goes, you have a Zuni connection, you have Pueblo connections, you have people from New Mexico. And then if you go to like White Mountain Apache and you have that drainage system, this is a really big component of the LCR. And then you have all these other drainages that go to from Peabody, you have water that comes from down there. And you also have Monavi, and it's a really huge system. And it's not easy just to talk about when you say LCR or the confluence. It's a very vast, intricate system, and there's a lot to say about it. But yeah, we all have a connection in some sort of way to not just listening about it, hearing about it, learning about it, but also working on what long-term protections look like. And that's from listening out all the people and looking at all the angles.
Thank you. Next, I want to ask you a related question, which is, what do you fear will be lost if the area is dammed or developed? And Sarani, you discussed the LCR system as a larger system. We know that the river is about 300 miles long. So, don't feel like you need to limit your answer to dams or development. If there's other threats that you'd like to bring up, feel free to discuss those as well. And so Ed, I'm going to go to you, and will you share with us what you fear might be lost if these proposals move forward?
Unmute. When I think of what will be lost, I can't help but think what already has been lost. In Tewa, that means so much has already been lost. So together, let's with one mind come together to seek our life together. If you look at the history of European settlement in the Americas, really the hard facts that our country needs to face to confront systemic issues in this country is to admit that this country was built upon the disenfranchisement of Native American people, and it was built on the slave labor of minority people, and in particular, the African American people. Our rights as citizens were not acknowledged, even though we're the original occupants human occupants of this land. I mean, it's really just recently in our history that we have obtained citizenship. The lands of our people, you know, have been claimed by Spain, by America. 500 open pit uranium mines that still exist on Navajo Nation today, you know. 45 billion gallons of water was sucked up underneath our feet during the Kayenta mine slurry between 1970 and 2005. A 200 to 300 year water supply that would have taken care of the Hopi tribe, you know, it's gone. It's never coming back. I think when you look at what's already taken place, this is ridiculous. This whole conversation of anything relating to the development of the confluence and or the LCR, to me, is just absolutely deplorable. You know, when does it stop is the question that I want to ask. You know, when are we going to stop and think? Hopi lives with an 80% unemployment rate. You know, many of our people still don't have running water or electricity, you know, and to add insult to injury, you know, we're denied any rights to the waters of the Little Colorado River. And now these threatenings of development in the very most sacred places, you know. So maybe it's a little bit different of a paradigm that I come at that question with, but to come full circle with it, I fear that everything is lost if we lose this. Everything. It's the heartbeat of the earth. Everything is lost.
Thank you, Ed. Serena, tell us what you fear could be lost if this area is dammed or developed or subject to any of the other abuses that we've discussed.
Yeah, I think Ed took all the words out of my mouth. But you know, this is what I've been working on, and I continue to work on, is, you know, prior to me starting at the trust, I was working with Save the Confluence families and as a volunteer coordinator, and just taking my own time, hitchhiking out there, you know, spreading the word about and learning about the confluence issue, and learning from traditionalists and learning from elders and all of that on what the confluence actually really means, instead of just protecting the environment and just saying it's a sacred site. You know, there's more to that, and you can't just say that. I think that, you know, what Ed had brought up on all the past developments that have happened, you know, those actually impact what will happen at the LCR. If you look at what the dam proposal is going to do, it's going to pump billions of gallons of water out of the area. And it's not a traditional dam where you're going to be collecting water from the LCR, but they're going to be putting wells in and pumping water to put on 3 reservoirs on top of the canyon. And there will be water that'll be collected down at the bottom too. But, you know, as they're drawing out the water to have that water run down to the dams to create energy, you are depleting the water source. You're not going to have that Blue Springs no more. You're not going to have any springs that are going to be around the area, where we already don't have the water infrastructure that's in the Western Agency. We're trying to figure out water sources and clean water sources because of the abandoned uranium mines that Ed had talked about. And you also are dealing with the N aquifer, which has been depleted by Peabody mine. So now you have, it's looking at the things that have happened in the past, and we're continuing to do it again, and continuing for what? This is all about Ed's, you know, what Ed's trying to talk about is colonization, assimilation, extermination. And that's what it is. And to what extent is it are we going to create energy or get more money, and at whose expense? And well, are we just like the bottom of the pole and just get rid of us, and that way you can get what you want? That's how I see it with the FERC process or any other agreements that are made out there. There's no compromise. There's no input and collaboration or advice from those that will be impacted. There's no consultation with tribes. There's no this in-depth knowledge that we have and why it's integral to protect these places. That's not shared, and it's been advocated for a very long time, and that's why you had protests all over the place. And it's the same message over and over, like quit coming onto our lands and quit developing on it, quit trying to extract from us, quit trying to take things away from us and push us off to another new reservation. We've been herded up like cattle all over the place and placed here and there. But it's all about erasing our identity, erasing our culture, erasing our language till we forget where we come from and who we are. And I think that's what would be lost, is that cultural identity. And that's what I fear for looking at when I'm looking at my boys and my family. I'm doing the best I can to protect the area because I don't want any of that cultural knowledge lost.
Thank you, Sarana. These are really hard topics to talk about. I'm really grateful to you both. I want to switch gears a little bit to talk about the tools that have been used to protect these places thus far, and what kind of methods we're going to use in the future. So, or the tribes are going to use in the future. So I'm going to start this section by asking, what tools have you as tribal members been able to use to fight threats to the confluence in the past? And then I'm going to follow up by asking what new methods you're employing to see that this area is protected into the future. So you can answer one or both of those questions to start. And let's go to you, Ed, to talk about that.
Sorry, I'm thinking real hard on these. I think I almost want to defer this my answer to Sarana, or I feel like maybe Sarana could answer this first, simply because I feel like she's got a better understanding and workings as well with the trust in working with the tribes specifically. And I feel like my methods are a little bit, it's a different approach. So maybe I could answer after Sarana on this one, if that's cool with Sarana.
Sarana?
Sure, that's fine.
Cool. Great, thanks.
Okay, we are going to need your assistance, Ed. and fighting, these threats that are on the LCR or in the Grand Canyon. And you're doing exactly what you're doing. You're doing the edutainment, and that's what the tools we need is your voice and talking about our cultural connections, because we come from more than two different tribes who have a connection to the Grand Canyon, and we have that voice to give our stance there, and unifying these tribes. That will be the tool to ensure that we overcome these threats, and as unity will prevail in asserting ourselves in protecting the Grand Canyon system as a whole. And not only is education the most important thing in talking about what the threats are and what our cultural connections are, but it's also not just talking to the public, but talking to our elected officials and letting them know what is at stake and what's happening, and that we elected them to be the voice for us and to be the voice of reason and to create legislation and policy, and to also collaborate with the communities, the homeowners, the grazing permittees, all the people that had been investment to the land, and to come up with some sort of policy protection, whatever that may be. If that has to deal with water, or if that has to do with cleaning up abandoned uranium mines, or if that's enforcing, taking a look at what the current legislation and policies that are there to protect the land in the first place. What does that look like? Do we have to bring that back to the table, and do we have to rewrite it and strengthen it to where it fits everybody's needs and not just the tribe at hand? You know, what does that look like in the long run? Those are the things that we're looking at when we're talking about the long-term protections, is bringing all those things I just talked about to the table, those voices, those concerns of community members, those who are trying to build a farming project in Loop, those who are like Tommy Rock, who's doing studies on abandoned uranium mines, those who are looking at the Bliss Springs and how much water flow is out there, because it's dramatically decreasing, and there's a concern for that. And just looking at the threats at hand. So how do we all work together and come up with a viable solution on what a long-term protection plan looks like? And for all we know, you know, with climate crisis and everything like that, you know, will there still be water that will still flow down the LCR because there's so many dams in place upstream? People are taking their straws and, you know, getting water out of there. So what is it at hand that we have to look at? And yeah, that's just the tools that we're working with right now. It's just a lot of community voices.
Cool. I'll take a stab at this now. And thanks for the love, Sarana. I appreciate the shout out on the edutainment. I think so. Vernon Masiasva from the Black Mesa Trust is a very important voice to me personally, and also I feel like to the Hopi community, and for Indigenous America as well, and for the Plateau profoundly. Vernon had a while back, you know, encouraged Sipapuni, you know, there along the Little Colorado River, to have it recognized as a sacred site on an international registry. And that's one tool, you know, that I know he had tried to wield at one point. I know another thing that Vernon has talked about is, you know, is there any possibility of an expansion of the park, you know, to protect Sipapuni, you know, to protect that area? And of course, I don't understand logistics of any of these things. And of course, today, those type of conversations involve, of course, the Navajo Nation and Hopi and other tribes and the Park Service. Vernon has talked about many tools, just like in your quiver, you know, you have many arrows. And, you know, it will take, as Sarana had mentioned, you know, the collective efforts of many people. And I do agree with Sarana that I personally feel that education is the most important thing. I think when it comes to tribes of the Colorado Plateau, that we're very much out of sight, out of mind to the general public. Our history of exploitation, the exploitation of the lands, you know, people come from all over the world to visit the Grand Canyon. I mean, all over the world, millions and millions of visitors, and they leave just as ignorant of the plight of the people and the lands of the plateau as they did when they came. I personally feel that education is all important, and so it's been a blessing to be able to work with actually the Sierra Club and with the Grand Canyon Trust, and personally with Allison and with Sarana on shows like the Rumble on the Mountain shows that we do annually in Flagstaff, the Rumble on the Rim show that we did at the Grand Canyon, and River Day shows, etc., to raise awareness of issues and at the same time, you know, create an event to, you know, draw people's attention, but then to inject that conscientious mindset, you know. So those are some tools that I recognize have been used and are being directed at the protection of the Little Colorado River. And for me personally, that's, you know, that's probably the approach I take, is the edutainment.
Great, thank you. And you both kind of got at that next question of what new methods are we employing to see that the area is protected in the future. But is there anything that Sarana or Ed that you want to add as far as ongoing efforts right now?
Sarani, go
I
ahead.
did. I was just say
Good.
that Ed did bring up a good point, and that's that, you know, I did say that the edutainment, the education has to come from not just community members or, you know, the people that have lived or utilized the land, but it really is stemming from cultural advisors and teachers like
Absolutely.
Vernon and many other people. And we have those elders there who are the guidance for us, who are trying to teach us something, and we're just passing on the knowledge just as it has been for generations. And I think that's the most important thing, is that it's the education doesn't derive from just Ed and I reading a book or picking up something. It really is an ingrained teaching knowledge that stems back from generations.
Thank you. All right.
Allison, going back to the method, you know, new ways and perhaps, it's funny to me because this type of thing, the internet, I mean, that's my phobia, you know. And this year with quarantine, there really has been no other means of carrying out a message. So this past year, bought an iPad and you know, I've been doing live streaming shows, and we were able to do several with the Trust and with the Sierra Club on the River Day last year. Most significantly to me, what we did last year was a show that we did in August on the Pueblo Revolt. And I'd like to edit that and reintroduce it, because right now, I feel like we have an opportunity, because the entire nation recognize the disparity between people of color and people of Caucasian heritage over this last year in a new way. Now, I said it at the beginning that I feel like we need to recognize that this country was built on, you know, the backs of people of color, and in particular, African Americans, and the disenfranchisement of Native American people. I think that's the hard truth that we need to recognize. But right now, I feel like the conscience of the nation is awakened. And as I mentioned in my introduction, this term of systemic racism, it's new to my vocabulary, but it's not new to my experience, you know. And I think that phrase, systemic racism, I mean, it's got teeth. It's got teeth that sink right now into the intellect and into the heart of people in the nation. And I think that if we can capitalize, as Sarana said, on the education right now and help people to see what's been taking place in the extraction of natural resources from the plateau, over the last 100 years, if people would see it, this whole thing would become unconscionable. You know, in my opinion, there would be crazy public outcry if everybody just knew, if everybody was just educated. I mean, I don't see how we could not say, what the hell is going on out there? You know, that's it.
Yeah, and Ed, I hope you don't mind if I give you a little plug, but I want to encourage people to look for you on social media, particularly right now on Facebook, and to find Ed Kubota and look for your live shows, because I know a lot of us have learned a lot from you this year, and we're really appreciative of the work you've done to educate us all in our home quarantine times. So,
thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. So I encourage people to look for you online. All right. So the final question I have, and I want to give the two of you time to kind of talk amongst yourselves and about this, is where have you seen barriers to your ability to protect your people, land, and water? And what needs to change to give you a better ability to protect the health of your tribe and communities? And we've talked a little bit, you know, we've kind of been getting at the answer to this question, but I'd really like to hear from both of you of what you think needs to change in order to give you the ability to, oh, and Sandy just put the link to find Ed on Facebook in the chat, so everybody can look for that. But yeah, I want to hear from you about what you think needs to change to give the tribes, to give tribal members ability to protect what's important to them and to protect the health of the people. So you can both talk amongst yourselves about that.
Yeah. Well, I'll start if it's okay, Sarana. I think that, okay, what needs to happen, essentially, Allison, moving forward?
Yeah, what kind of changes do you think need to be made? And it could be anything. I could give you examples if you want, but I'd rather hear from you. Yeah.
Well, again, I think I tend to come at things from a large picture perspective. And when I think of barriers to indigenous communities, it's like, hello, you know, statistically, they say in America today that an African American is 3 times as likely to be killed by a police officer in the line of duty, 3 times as likely than a person of Caucasian race. A less known statistic, a less quoted statistic, is the fact that Native Americans are the most likely race to be murdered by an officer of the law. Where in the city of Flagstaff in 2019, 52% of the arrests made by the Flagstaff Police Department were Native American people. 52%. I mean, you think of all the people that come up from the valley, you know, and hang out in Flagstaff, the people from all over the world that visit Flagstaff as a Grand Canyon gateway community. You know, yes, Flagstaff is a border town, but 52%. The Native American population in the city of Flagstaff is, I think it's 10% or less. And 52%, it's ridiculous. What needs to change? Holy moly, you know, so much needs to change. And really what I think most needs to be changed from a big picture perspective is that we need to grab hold of our society and shake us up and say, look, let's just open our eyes and let's recognize what's happening. Because even going back to education, I mean, even in the Even in a border town like Flagstaff, that seems like it should be so conscious. You've got Havasupai community, you've got Wallapai community, you've got Hopi, Zuni, Apache, Yavapai, Navajo. You've got all of these communities surrounding Flagstaff, and Flagstaff just seems oblivious, you know, to who we are and what we have to say. So I think there are so many things that need to change. In the big picture, we need to recognize the disparity. And in the immediate, I just feel like we need to have some super meaningful dialogues, and we need to teach some history, some real history.
Are you waiting for me, Allison?
I am.
Okay. Dramatic pause. All right. So looking at all your questions, where have I seen the barriers in protecting the people, land, and water? I would say barriers are acknowledging that one, we're on reservations, we're on federal land, and that means yes, we are sovereign and we make our decisions, but we're still being babysat by the Washington DC. That's exactly, and we sit under the Department of Interior. And if you look at the Department of Interior, the history behind it, and that was created as a like Department of Defense, and that's like there's a whole lot of different things that are situated in there, and it goes back to that acknowledgement of colonization, extermination, and assimilation, and all of that, and that continues to go on today. And so I think the barrier is just acknowledging that we are not free as people think. We may be on a reservation. We have a lack of everything. We have a lack of infrastructure. The education system is bad. You know, I'm not going to really put everything down that's bad, but it's not that we have those hindrances there. It's that the progress to go forth is really limited by BIA and the federal agencies that oversee us. And I think that's the barriers that I see. If we were to get rid of that, that would be great, and we would really be our own sovereign people and really be doing our own things. And what needs to change? And that's exactly it. What needs to change is that we need to be more self-sustaining, and we need to get out from this. We need to get rid of the babysitter, and we need to move on. And we need to, because of that, and we're able to create our own infrastructure. We're able to, do all the things that help us move forward. And in place of that, it'll give us, we'll have better tools to put in place on how land management should look like. And what I mean by that is, if we're to do, I just talked about the dams and Escalade, I mean, all uranium issues, Peabody, all those things that were put in place there. Those are entities that came in. Those are federal agencies that came in to propose these ideas. But if we eliminate those federal agencies and all that stuff, and just be our own consultants and our own masterminds behind us, we could do our own land management. We don't have to be a afterthought, a check mark on the box, and all of those things that we see currently. We need to come to the head of the table, and we need to be there first and foremost and say, hey, you know what, you're trying to develop on our land. Well, we're right here. Let's talk about it right now. Instead of us being at the later end of the spectrum, like Canyon Mine or anything else, and say, you know what, we're right here right now. Tucson development. You're looking at over pumping a lot of water. Same with canyon mine, and it's going to impact Havasupai, and it's going to impact the greater region of Grand Canyon. I think that laws need to be looked at right now, and laws need to be changed. And your question was about water supply, and I just went into that. We need to look at how are we gonna look at these laws in place and these, which are barriers, and how do we go about cleaning abandoned uranium mines, not just on Navajo Nation, but all on indigenous lands. How do we look at pipelines that are being proposed and acknowledge that those are not good development ideas also, and they're impacting all communities. And fracking is another one. You know, there's a lot of things that are out there. Why can't we go into Phoenix or anywhere else, Vegas or whatever, and start doing projects over there? No, because somebody's going to get offended and somebody's going to shut it down. Well, let's just take it over to indigenous nations and nobody will say anything. It's federal law right there, and they'll go with it. So I look at laws, and it's just all about laws, and us being under the Department of Interior and all of that bureaucracy stuff. Yeah, I know I'm going off topic, but that's just how I see things. It's just
Not off topic at all.
No, you're right on target.
I see what Ed's frustration is about, and I know it is. I know what he's talking about.
What I appreciate about what Sarana has just mentioned is that kind of a lot of the more specific things, specific actions. And I think what I most appreciate about Sarana's comments just there is that we as indigenous people need to take a lot of things into our own hands. Now, this is a difficult thing to recognize, because we're dealing, each one of us, I'd have to say, we're carrying bitterness, we're carrying trauma in our DNA, you know, and it's like we have been beaten to a pulp, and now we're expected to stand up and be productive American citizens. You know, Malcolm X is the one that said that he can't respect a system that will throw a man down, you know, beat his face into the dirt, and then penalize him for not being able to stand up. I feel like we need to stand up as indigenous nations. It concerns me that people today are recognizing the disparity, but in past, we've always forgotten about it. You know, I mean, we have Jim Crow laws to replace the Emancipation Proclamation. We have, you know, 1/4 of the world's prison population in the United States of America, you know, to replace the initiatives of the civil rights movement. Right now, we've been awoken once again to systemic racism, but what are we going to do, you know, in the future to fix it? Or are we just going to create another institution to enslave people of color? There's been a lot of donations to indigenous people to help us in this emergency situation that we've been in quarantine. That doesn't fix infrastructures, you know. And I think that, to me, is my main concern, is that's what Sarana has mentioned. It's infrastructures that we don't have in place. I mean, again, we've been knocked to the curb and then been told to stand up. And as we begin to just be able to function once again, you know, as a culture, as a society. I feel like, unfortunately, that's a journey that we need to take for ourselves. We need to redefine ourselves as sustainable communities. We need to do these things for ourselves. And I think that's also something that I'm hearing, you know, from Sarana's comments. And I just want to say, I really appreciate being, again, able to work with Sarana, because this is a perfect example of, you know, the dynamics of seeing things and having that feminine wisdom that I think is so important and so lacking in United States culture, you know. Yeah, so thank you as well, Allison.
Thank you, Ed. Yeah, I think the history, the what we carry generation to generation, that historical trauma, it really is there. And I mean, even us talking and how passionate and heated our arguments are here, it's evident that we see it at a firsthand basis every day. When we go back home and we're at home, we see that, you know, that, like for me at home, I grew up with Peabody Mine outside, just out the door, and I could see the issues at hand over there. I could see the mining taking place, the blasting that was done. I could see the land being changed, and I could see all of that. I didn't grow up with electricity or running water out there. And a lot of us still don't have electricity and running water. I still don't have running water, but I'm fine with it. You know, I learned how to adapt around that. It's but when you have to get clean drinking water, you know, you have to go very far to go get those basic necessities. You know, if you want to, you're out there for so long on a reservation, you get to crave pizza and all these different things out there, and you're so happy to go to the store. Even I was really happy to go to Kutzmobi and go check the mail with grandma and get some popcorn and ice cream. You know, those things those everybody takes for granted. And I'm glad I have the opportunity to take my boys back out there to show them what it's like, because I don't want them to grow up pampered and to be dependent on the necessities of being here wherever we may be at. If it's in Flagstaff, Phoenix, taking a little trip somewhere for a little family time, you know, I want them to understand that this is where they came from. You're going to haul water, and if you spill that bucket of water, you better find, like, that was it. You know, we're going to have to go travel way far away, go get some more water. And how we heat the home is, you know, we have to find different heating sources. The way I look at it, how much we consume in heating our homes out there by chopping down wood and once relied on coal, you know, we have to think of better solutions. Our young people have to think of better solutions on building a more sustaining home out there. And I have to be an example for them too. And I have to build my own home if I'm going to live out there. And I want them to look at the research at hand and find something that's viable to where I don't have to be taking down a whole forest just to heat the home. And what does that look like for my son who's learning to be an electrician? I want him to think of ways to not be dependent on the grid and to look at solar system or wind farming or something. You know, what is it that we already have? We don't even need electricity. You know, we have the sun. And I think when we're looking at overall what needs to be changed, what needs to happen, it's just recognizing again who we are, how we survive, how we continue to survive, and how we go forward from the knowledge that we have, and ensuring that the system could fail us. I mean, we look at Texas and that failed everybody over there. But you had Navajos out there who were cooking outside, making bread and everything. So it's just all about that education and that knowledge passed down to generation to generation, and ensuring that continues to stay intact. And we have a lesson from each thing that has happened, and to learn from that lesson.
Thank you both. I really appreciate your insights. I would like to, I see that there's some audience questions coming in, and so I want to give a little time for you all to respond to a few questions from people who are participating in the webinar. But before we do that, I know people want to know what they can do. And so we spoke amongst ourselves and we decided on a few action items tonight. And first of all, when there is a chance for a comment period or some kind of input on the dams or anything else that may come forward, we will contact everybody who's registered for this webinar and let you know. So we'll tell you if there's an opportunity to comment or participate directly in the process related to these proposed dams. Hopefully that won't happen because they'll just get shot down. But should it go that far. But what we thought would be a great action that people could take is to support two organizations that are working really hard to protect the Little Colorado River and the confluence. And so one of them is Save the Confluence. So the families of Save the Confluence have worked really, really hard and pushed this issue and got the Navajo Nation to reject the tram proposal a few years ago. And now they're working to get the nation to oppose these dams. And the other organization is Black Mesa Trust. And Black Mesa Trust is working to get some science on the springs and trying to figure out how to protect the Sipapu and the springs in the Little Colorado River. So Sandy Barr just posted 2 websites there, and you can go to either of those websites, and both of them you can donate and learn more about those organizations. And they both really need a lot of help, things like money for travel, to attend meetings, printing, outreach, everything. So communications, all of it. So we thank you for considering making donations to those organizations. And next, I would like to pass on some of these questions to you two and get your insights on them. So Sandy Barr our chapter director, has been monitoring the chat box. And Sandy, if I could put you on the spot to choose some questions and throw them at us, that would be great.
Sure. Thanks, Allison. One of the questions is from Stan Bendel, and he's asking, what are current threats to the Little Colorado?
Yeah, that would, I feel like, again, Sarana is probably a good person for this answer. However, I think the Little Colorado is under constant threat, and I think Sarana can probably fill in some details here, but when I went to Washington, DC a couple years ago, as during the lobby week with the Sierra Club, we met with, our Arizona representatives and with staff of the senators. And when we sat down with Senator McCain's staff at that time, I brought up the Little Colorado River. It wasn't part of our agenda. It wasn't anything like that. I was trying to push his buttons, to be honest with you. I told him, McCain is known as a maverick. Well, heck, man, we need a champion out here in Arizona. We need somebody to stand up for the water rights. And I brought up the Little Colorado River specifically, and not McCain's staff, but the other senator's staff at the time had indicated to me, well, he just said plainly that you Hopis have no way to harness the waters of the Little Colorado River. I mean, it's crazy to me that people who have no connection to this landscape know all about that little river right there. It's under constant threat, and it will be under constant threat. I expect it to. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and defer that now to Sarana.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. So the current threats that we're facing on the LCR is, like I said, the escalated development. Yes, that was voted down, but that doesn't mean that a native-owned developer can come in and do the same thing. You have Cameron, which is situated, right outside of the Grand Canyon. So you have a community that's trying to tap into tourism along with all the Western agencies of the Navajo Nation. Tourism is a huge thing there. And so you got to look into what is it that the communities want to do. I've heard, it's not a threat, but you have to think of what communities want. They would like to do a cultural center, hiking trail system, bike trail system. And then you look at, just basically what does the community want? Bed and breakfasts out there. Those are good, good plans. They could be considered threats to whoever sees that as another angle. And then of course you have the 3 dams that were proposed. And I don't know if you guys are aware of where these dams will be proposed, but I can show it on the screen if Allison will let me share something.
You should be able to have sharing. Are you not able to?
Wait, no, I'm trying to pull it up first.
Okay.
Hold on. Oh, wait. Sure.
There you
Okay, so when we're looking at, do you guys see the map, or do you guys see you guys's?
We see the map.
Okay, so looking at the map, we sit at LCR here, and we see that where it says Little Colorado River Gorge on the top left, that's where the Escalade development would have been. And if you go down, you'll see the Salt Trail Canyon. You'll see this. And so the first dam proposal was the Little Colorado River pump storage, and that would have been situated right here in this little drainage system. And then the second proposed one was the Salt Trail Canyon pump storage, which would have been a little west of the Salt Trail Canyon. But those two were not approved by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And they decided to go with a different proposal, and that's the Big Canyon pump storage. Now, when you look at the Big Canyon pump storage, it would be situated in that little tributary right there at the Big Canyon. And it would look like this right here. You would see a dam here situated, and you would have 3 reservoirs up on top, which would pump water down to the bottom and create generate electricity. And of course, there's not a lot of water that comes through this area. It's just a closed off drainage system. So that's proposed on the Little Colorado River. If you look at a bigger map in the middle, it's not that far from Cameron, between Cameron and Tuba City. And it's the Cameron chapter has put in a resolution stating that they don't approve of this dam proposal. I believe, I'm not sure if we got the resolution at Bottomway Gap, which is situated over here, said that they did not approve of it either. So that's the dam at this moment. And so those are the current threats right now. If you're looking at the bigger picture, is just the dam proposal. There are other community developments that are in the works, but those are little in-house fighting things that are being talked about. And of course, you have what Ed mentioned is the abandoned uranium mines, which need to be cleaned up in the Western Agency. And of course, with the abandoned uranium mines, you have to look at clean drinking water infrastructure. How do we get clean, viable drinking water to households and family? Where does that come from? Does that come from page? Do we have to look for a well? If we look for a well, now we're in competition with a dam. So yeah, it's just, those are the current threats that I see right now.
Great, thanks. Do you foresee having a Native voice at the head of the Interior Department helping the cause of getting Native voices more present in decision-making processes about ancestral land?
You were cutting out a little, Sandy. I don't know if everybody was able to hear all of that. But the question was, do you foresee having a Native voice at the head of the Interior Department, helping the cause of getting Native voices more present in the future decision-making processes about your ancestral lands?
You know, I would say I've never met Deb Holland. You know, I'm encouraged that she's of Pueblo descent. I'm encouraged that it's a woman, to be honest with you. And I think the significance of her appointment is not only that she's Native American, but also that she represents that feminine wisdom that I think we need so much in this country. So I think, to me, it does represent a little bit of light thrown into the situation. Of course, like I said, I don't know, you know, I think those are the things that are significant to me.
Great. And Sarana, do you want to mention the link that you just posted?
Yeah, I just threw a link in the chat room. This came out yesterday, I believe. It's just a link that says that the White House announces environmental justice advisory council members. So there was, I believe, a couple people that were appointed to this advisory group here, and one of them on this list is Carletta Lucy from Arizona, and she's from the Havasupai tribe, and she's been very, very vocal, and I really respect Carletta so much when she's addressing the impacts of issues surrounding Grand Canyon, because, you know, Havasupai is located at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, but traditionally it has been a bigger space than that. If you were to look at how big the historical area of Havasupai is, it goes from Tuba City area past Flagstaff all the way down to Camp Verde, like going up towards Havasupai area, like Hurd right now. And so it's above and below the rim. So with her knowledge and cultural teachings, and she's really is vocal about her cultural upbringing and the history passed down, which she really tries to teach to all the younger people. I think her voice and all the other people that are selected would be this is a great avenue right now. And I think it sets the stage for, and with Deb being in the Department of Interior, I think it really sets a stage for traditional Indigenous knowledge being at the forefront of issues.
Great. Yeah, I think there's some cause for hope, some change ahead, I hope. All right, Sandy, do you want to choose another question?
Sure. Hopefully it won't break up this time. Why not do what Ecuador and numerous other countries have done and introduce legislation for the rights of nature, that the Little Colorado River and the Little Colorado have legal rights? Like personhood, I think, is basically.
Yeah, I'm all for it.
I want to interject. I was the one that proposed that, but I think there are 40 countries worldwide, I might be a little off on the numbers, that have already done this, where they say that there's a right of nature and it's in law. Just FYI.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful concept, and I think that is much closer to the to our own concept of life. You know, is that all things are living, all things are alive. I think that'd be wonderful. You know, forgive me of my skepticism as a Native American that grew up in the United States of America. For you know, but I think that's a wonderful concept. Yeah.
Great. Full support. Sandy, are there any other questions?
Yeah, Gary had a question about the 30 by
Hey,
30.
Sandy,
Oh, yeah, go.
could I speak to that real quick? In addressing the long-term objective of the Little Colorado River, that is one of the strategic angles that we're looking at, is rights of nature and how that fits into the protection of the LCR, because you already have in place, you have a biological preserve, and it's labeled as endangered just for the species that are involved. You have, from Cameron to the confluence, you have the Navajo Nation parks that is there in place, and then looking at other aspects of it, you have the intergovernmental, I always forget the name wrong, but there's a compact agreement between Navajo and Hopi that looks at the cultural significance of the area, and there's an agreement in place to where it protects that area. And if there was a development that was if there was some type of development or a threat within that compact agreement, it would go into some legal aspect. So that's always at the first and foremost of any discussion between Navajo and Hopi. So rights of nature, I'm gonna go to my notes over here real quick. Hold on. We just had a conversation about this today. So if we're to look at the rights of nature case for the LCR, we would be looking at the geographic extent and scope of this case study. So like how much are we talking about, the whole river system? And because we can't just include, like, put it into little sections, we have to look at it as its entirety. And also, we can't just, as a trust or any other nonprofit, we just can't come in and decide what's right for the community members or the tribes that are affiliated with the area. We have to have guidance from them, from those different tribal entities, and also Navajo Nation, which the land is situated on. And then if you're looking at the part of the Colorado River and the Little Colorado River, you have the boundary of Grand Canyon National Park. So then you have to have them also included in the conversation. And within the Grand Canyon National Park, you have the Grand Canyon Intertribal Conversation Group, and that's appointed elected leaders from all 11 affiliated tribes that make decisions on co-management of Grand Canyon National Park. So it would be a really big discussion with a lot of different people and cultural historic departments from all those 11 affiliated, or not all 11 affiliated tribes, but the tribes that would be having a discussion with. I hope that helps.
Thanks, Serena.
Yeah, I really I'm sorry. I just wanted to say I really appreciate that perspective. And again, I think as Vernon Messiasva had mentioned, we need many arrows in our quiver in defending the Little Colorado River. And I think the rights of nature, you know, is one, but I also think that there's, you know, yeah, there's many arrows that need to be part of that, you know, and yeah, but thank you so much. I think that's essential.
The last thing is that we also, in acknowledgement of looking at rights of nature, in Diné law, we have our fundamental law, which is, I put it in the chat, the link to that. And that's kind of, that's from a traditionalist, like a holistic view of what our traditional practitioners think, not think, but what they were instructed, and how we are governed by our deities to live symbiotic with the land. So that's in this court document here.
Great. We have about 2 minutes left, so I don't know if there's a quick question that we can choose before we wrap up.
The last question I see is, what role can the tribes play in the 30 by 30 project? From Gary.
So either you want to talk about that a little bit?
I know that there are various solar initiatives. Vernon, again, Messiasva from Black Mesa Trust, Visit the Link has talked about that. I know that the Black Mesa Water Coalition also has talked about that. So the thing is, you know, a comparative study about how much water, and Sarana has already alluded to this, how much water people use on the reservation. I mean, I would say that by and large, Native American people are really doing their part when it comes to conservation of certain resources just by the way that we're living. I would hope that perhaps we could share some ways that we can all conserve and live more simply, as Sarana has talked about by her own lifestyle. But also, you know, I guess I would hope that perhaps in our spaces, maybe in the future, we could contribute to, I'm interested in how we could contribute to solar energy. Thanks so much for listening.
I wanted to say that 30 by 30 project is something that was just recently addressed to me in a conversation, and I don't have all the information for it, but it was enough information for me to talk to somebody more about it. And I don't know who to talk to about it. So if you want to talk with me more, I just put my email in the chat box.
Great. All right. Well, it's time for us to wrap up, and I am so grateful to both of you. This has really been a terrific conversation, and I see in the comments that people feel like they got a lot of information and insight out of it. You know, not just facts, but understanding of the issue. And I'm really grateful to you both for conveying that. So next week, we will be talking about the Tusayan development. So I'd like to invite participants to come back and hear about that. We will have Tusayan Mayor Clorinda Vale, former Tusayan Mayor and member of the board of the Tusayan Sanitary District, Pete Shearer, and Havasupai Tribal Council member, Colleen Casca. And so I invite you all to come and talk about that proposed development, because you know, everybody wants to make a buck off Grand Canyon. But I am really, really grateful. I think that tonight's conversation has been just wonderful and really enlightening. So thank you to you both for your energies and your persistence and your education on this, and for helping us all to understand it a little bit better.
Thank you, everybody.
Likewise. Thank you guys for helping me too.
All right. Well, Well, with that, we'll sign off and thank you all. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening.